Okay, I didn't realize that. Thank you. Okay. We'll also see about some common Selenium exceptions. Even we saw one exception previously, right? No such element exception. We have, and this no such element exception you saw, right? The finding, if it tries to find the element, the particular locator which we try to give, and if the element is not found in the particular page, it will throw no such element exception, and it throws that exception once the DOM is fully loaded actually. And if the DOM is fully loaded at the particular time, if there are no elements present inside the DOM, then it throws no such element exception. And we also have no such window exception. So we are just seeing the example of switching the window. If we are trying to switch a window which is not available at that moment, for example, we have gotten here by clicking here. But there might be some scenarios, and we have got that in a set of string. But there might be some scenarios where the window automatically closes if you do some operations. You might have seen in some websites. So you would have gotten those information in the set of string, but at the time of switching that window, you might have not realized that the window is already closed. In those cases, this exception is thrown. And we also have no such frame exception. You're trying to switch to a frame, so the frame is not available. It throws the exception. And we also have no alert exception, no alert present exception. This is sometimes very irritating exception, very frequent also if you have alert to handle. And many older applications or banking or those kind of applications will always have these alerts. So it is always right. I mean, it is always important to switch or accept the alert or dismiss the alert only when it appears. And what this alert will do before and we have to do any one of thing. You have to accept or dismiss. Before, if we are not doing that, it's not allowed to do any other operation over our website. I've seen. Right? So alerts is mandatory handle. But what if we try to accept or dismiss the alert even before the alert is loaded? So it's very irritating, and the remaining codes will also not execute because of this alert actually. So it is always important to handle this. Give it sufficient time to wait and handle this alert exception. Uh, and we also have this, you might have seen this if you have done automation, invalid selector exception. You might have given a particular selector, but it might have been invalid. Maybe in some XPath cases, it might have occurred. Okay, your path is correct, but the particular attribute you're trying to search is not there, so it's an invalid selector. So it will throw the invalid selector exception. And what else? We have element not visible exception. So if the element is not visible in the, but it may be in the DOM, or if you're trying to click, it's not visible in the web page, and it will throw that exception. And we have this something called stale element exception. I think it's one of the very common interview question also, I guess, right? What's a stale element exception? Anybody knows the answer? Okay. So it is one of the exception where the element was there in your DOM, but it is currently not there now. So that's the meaning of stale element exception there. It was there, uh, in your DOM at the time of some event, but some event happened so that this element disappeared in the DOM. That's a stale element exception as well. We know this DOM is actually a very dynamic one. This particular DOM, it changes. Maybe this is not the right website to show. Maybe I will try to show in. So you just see this got refreshed. If anyone saw that, you see, right? It's now refreshing. It's now whatever the areas that is highlighted in this purple color. Those are the areas which it is getting up. DOM is getting updated. So whatever action I do on the website, see the head is getting updated, board is getting updated. For every action over my web page, this particular DOM will get updated. It's not constant at all. Maybe at the time of one operation, your element might have been present. Now DOM gets updated. The element might have been removed from the DOM. You never know. So this tail element exception error is also kind of common. And we also have this timeout exception. Right. So we wait for a implicit timeout, explicit timeout. Right? So in both the thing, it will throw an exception. So implicitly, we waited for some default in 30 seconds. It throws an exception. And explicit wait, we all know that it can. So it will wait for the particular element, particular number of time based on certain expected conditions. If that is not met, then it will throw an exception. We have this timeout exception. So I think most of the important things we have covered. And okay, with respect to test automation, so it is always important to um, keep in mind these exceptions because there are 50%, 60% possibility that one of these exception might occur. Because we are dealing with something which is very dynamic. The websites are actually very dynamic. It depends upon lots of factors. It depends upon how much internet connection speed you have, how much catching happened, as I said previously, how much catching happened, and how much able your website is loaded by your browser also. Some websites are loaded differently in different browsers. We know your Chrome browser might load it differently, Firefox might load it differently, and there are some CSS which are applied to the particular element by the browser itself. The browser itself has some capabilities to change your web elements actually by applying some CSS and all. So it's always we should keep in mind like okay, one of the exception occurring chances very high, so we have to handle this exception. So only in our automation code and all we use lots of if conditions. Everything everything we do, if you see in almost all the cases we use if this if condition to automate our steps. There is no step without the if condition. So this is kind of mandatory. We just cannot go and do a sequence of line of code to do this. I cannot just go and say, hey, this driver.find and driver.click. It is not going to work out every time. So I have to use an if condition, check if it's clickable or if it's enabled. Then I have to perform this any operation which I wanted to want. And for each and every operation, it is mandatory. So that is also an important thing you have to keep in mind. Okay. And um, and also we'll start with the frameworks. I think most of the basics. we just saw the basics, like what's a Selenium, Selenium, maybe WebDriver. So basic to basic Selenium driver methods to get the URL and get the current source, get the title, get and Windows and window handling this radio processor, click buttons and getting text, finding expats, locators. Okay. I think most of the basics are okay only. We'll try to go to some frameworks actually. Okay, before that, I wanted to understand from you people like why we need a framework and why frameworks are important. What's a framework actually?
We can reuse basic methods, basic functions.
Okay, one of the purpose of framework. Apart from that, what's a framework? What already said is right. It's one of the purpose of framework. Any other thing? Any other thing that you can think of?
As I think it's reusability and more often structuring uh, the implementation so that we can use it somewhere else.
Yes, yes, yes. Almost answer. Actually, it's kind of a design that everyone should, not only with respect to testing. If you do anything with respect to coding, we have to follow some framework actually. So frameworks will give you some of a design orientation. Okay, this is the way we have to do things, so that things will be easier for us to structure in future. So the structuring is one thing, and like Shiva said and like Varsha said, this reusability is one thing. So these are the two important aspects of a framework. So we have to design and create our modules inside our project in such a way that it is easily maintainable and it is easily scalable. And these are the applications of a framework, right? Whenever a new person comes, it should be easily able to, hey, this is, I know this structure. If, Maven has some structure, page object model will have some structure. So these are kind of project structures or a framework structure. So a person comes and knows, hey, okay, I'm aware of this project structure, then I can go and implement that. I don't have to spend much time because you just write some random classes in random code in some random classes in the random packages. We'll never know what is what and where is where. And scaling and maintaining is also an important thing. For example, I have some 10 test cases now. I have some set of codes written somewhere. What if my web pages increase and the web application becomes complex and I have to scale for 500, 600 regression cases suddenly? It becomes totally messy and you never know what happened. And there is something called code modularity. Right? Modularity is something, there are blocks of code which will do certain operation. You just interconnect that block. That's it. You don't have to uh, randomly put everything everywhere. Right? This modularity is important concept in programming. So to achieve reusability, structuring, modularity, maintainability, and scalability, we need frameworks. Right?
Karthik,
Mhm.
as we read the framework, does this framework uh, called also design patterns, or it's like I know we have the design pattern with respect to languages, but do we
Uh-huh,
ever
uh-huh,
call this
uh-huh.
framework also?
Actually, okay, design pattern are somewhat with respect to languages because each language will have a different syntax and different way of implementing things. But design pattern is very generic thing actually. Design pattern, I don't see. It's okay. It will change depend upon program language, but it is not with we. Let's say, yeah, certain design pattern like singleton we saw I think, okay, we'll explain singleton. So there's a design pattern called prototype. There's a design pattern called the factory design pattern. There's a design pattern called chain design pattern. So this is a way. See, framework is there. Framework. I said this is to achieve reusability, modularity of code. But how we are going to achieve this reusability, modularity, or scalability? It is through one of the design patterns. So design patterns are way of implementing a framework. A framework can be implemented in many ways. Right? So design pattern helps us to narrow down. Okay, I'm going to design a framework through this, like this only, like that. So page object model is also one of the design pattern. It's not a framework actually. It's one of the design pattern actually.
So as you were saying, like with respect to the design patterns, so it's language biased, right? So it's not specific to any language, but it's a generalized concept like data structures and algorithms,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So okay, that is clear. Okay. When it comes to the frameworks, okay, other than page object pattern, okay, do we have any other like keyword driven or the data driven, okay, or hybrid? Does they call as a design patterns?
You can call it as a design pattern actually. It's a framework structure implemented by this keyword driven or data driven design patterns. Right? So we call it as framework, but again, inside a framework, it's an actual design pattern only. Right? Why I call this a design? Oh, see, what's a design and what's a pattern? We are designing your framework through some patterns, right? And the entire process we call as a framework. Entire thing we call as a framework. So what the page object model achieve? We captured every element in a particular class, and we try to store it in a single class. So for each and every page, we have each and every class to have these elements. So what is a keyword driven? We have all the methods that are available in our what is Excel or something. We drive the particular um, method in our particular class by calling each and every method name that are written in an Excel sheet. So how we are going to achieve that? Through this design pattern called keyword driven design pattern. It will read the Excel data, it will invoke a method in a particular class through something called reflections, and it will perform some operations whatever written over the particular method. Again, in data driven, what happens? You read the data from Excel sheet, but to implement that reading and all, you have to have a library like Apache BOI, and you have to put it somewhere. You cannot just randomly read the Excel sheet anywhere, right? You have to, like, let's say you have a separate class to read and write data into Excel sheet, and you are extending that class in each and every page object that you are using. So that's a design pattern. Again. So putting a code in one class and reusing that particular code in another class wherever possible. It's one of the design pattern which we achieve in our framework through this data-driven framework, right? Data-driven concept. It's not two separate terms. It's always intertwined terms. Actually.
Okay, thank you.
No, I hope I was clear actually on this.
Yes.
Otherwise we'll discuss a lot of things about this actually as we progress. uh, it's always actually we'll do all many things and while we do things actually. And most of the time these design patterns are are kind of what to say, limited in okay, limited is not the right term. Okay, there are a few. Okay, there are few design patterns which are common in testing world. I can say like that. So these are the design patterns we most probably use. Let's say page object model. Let's say keyword driven or data driven. See, keyword driven, data driven are concepts, right? And how we are going to implement this concept is what design pattern we are going to implement. Right? So See, we call that as keyword driven because it is driven by some keywords in an external Excel sheet. And we call that as data driven because it is the data is driven from an Excel sheet. But the way we implement that code in our particular framework is driven by design pattern. Actually. And there are not too many things or too many changes, at least as far as I saw. Uh, Even in my company, there are few common frameworks that are designed in Ruby actually. For entire company, we have we had actually previously an automation squads kind of thing or automation team kind of thing. So what they did is like they designed an automation framework commonly for the entire company actually to use. But what this individual projects did, if it is usable for them, they used that. Otherwise, if it's not usable, they designed their own framework actually. Maybe I'll show that initial framework also. Licenses expert. Okay, maybe I'll show this little later. So what I was trying to say is like, see, we had this Ruby project actually initially, but we thought like we'll better go for Java because what's the problem with Ruby is like Ruby is a good program. It's nice to learn. It's very fun to do programming with because many things which you wanted to achieve can be easily achieved in Ruby compared to Java actually. Java you will need so many steps, but Ruby you can do it in 2-3 steps like Python actually. Ruby is very easy to program and very easy to start actually to scale initially actually not as you progress because the code usability is very high compared to Java and Ruby, and just you have to copy paste codes from here and there, and you can develop a framework very easily. Even the concept is same as what we see here in this automation framework. We have a particular framework that is designed. We have this elements captured in a particular. So we have this page object model here, right? The things are same there, but we do it in a kind of another way in the different framework. So in most of the cases, we don't use this page object model individually, right? We use along with the keyword or data driven framework. And most of the cases nowadays, we use hybrid framework. And the framework structure is always similar to what we see here. We have this page object located here for each and every pages. We have this individual steps to perform some action over the page object, or it may be a step definition file also. And if it's a cucumber, we call this step definition file. If it's a test ng, we call it as a test method, a test annotated method. And it is driven by either your pom.xml or your cucumber feature file. Right? So structure is almost same. Just how we implement is different, right? Either we can implement the structure through a cucumber, or we can implement the structure through testng. So that is the difference. Otherwise, the structures are the same. Right? And we have this common property file to get some properties at the runtime, and we have this Excel sheet in maybe in the project path itself to get the data and run. So we have this resources folder also. So resources mainly to maintain this test data and this property files and those kind of things for runtime property and runtime environment. This is the basic structure of a framework. We have in most of the framework that we'll go, we have this page objectable model class to capture the objects. We have a step or a step definition or test methods where the core logic is written, and we have this driver file. Either can be a feature file or form.xml file, right? And we have this resources to maintain these resources. Can be a property file or an Excel or CSV, or it can be simple JSON. Nowadays, most of the people are preferring JSON actually more than Excel or CSV. For test data, they are using the framework like Faker to generate dynamic test at the runtime itself. So, not more, all the frameworks, but many frameworks, if you go and see them, like the structure will be like this only. If you keep this in mind and evaluate the framework, it will probably very easy for us to understand the particular framework itself. Fine. Okay, we'll continue this framework thing from tomorrow. Anything we wanted to discuss today? Whatever we saw. Hello.
For me, it's no.
Okay. Can we wrap up the session then?
Yes, Karthik.
Okay. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thanks, Karthik.
Thank you.